The United States 1-cent coin dated 1961 with the D mint mark, commonly called the Lincoln Memorial Penny, represents an important yet often overlooked chapter in American numismatics, reflecting both everyday economic life and the evolving artistry of U.S. coinage during the early Cold War era. This coin was struck at the Denver Mint, indicated by the small d, beneath the date on the obverse, and it belongs to the long-running Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the birth of President Abraham Lincoln, making it the first regular U.S. circulating coin to feature a real historical person rather than an allegorical figure, a bold decision at the time that forever changed American coin design traditions. By 1961, the Lincoln cent had already undergone a major reverse redesign, as the original wheat ears reverse, 1909 to 1958, had been replaced in 1959 with the Lincoln Memorial reverse, designed by Frank Gasparo, which depicts the neoclassical Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., with a tiny seated statue of Lincoln visible between the central columns, an extraordinary detail that technically makes Lincoln appear on both sides of the same coin. The obverse design, created by Victor David Brenner, shows a right-facing portrait of Lincoln with the inscriptions "In God We Trust" above, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1961 with the D mint mark to the right, all struck in high relief relative to later decades, giving well-preserved examples a strong visual presence. Compositionally, the 1961 D penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, weighing 3.11 grams, with a diameter of 19.05 millimeters and a plain edge, part of the classic bronze cent era that would last until 1982. And today these copper-rich cents are often noted for their warm reddish tone when uncirculated. In terms of production, the Denver Mint struck approximately 1,753,266,500, over 1.75 billion coins, an enormous mintage reflecting the booming U.S. population, rising consumer economy, and heavy reliance on small change for daily transactions such as newspapers, public transport, and vending machines, which means the coin is very common in circulated grades. Historically, the year 1961 sits at a fascinating moment in American history, coinciding with the presidency of John F. Kennedy, the heightening tensions of the Cold War, the space race following Yuri Gagarin's flight, and the early momentum of the civil rights movement. And while the penny itself was not commemorative, it circulated widely through these transformative social and political events, silently witnessing them in everyday commerce. From a collector's standpoint, the 1961 D Lincoln cent is generally affordable and accessible, making it a popular entry coin for beginners and a standard inclusion in Lincoln cent albums, with circulated examples typically valued at face value to a few cents, while uncirculated examples can range from modest premiums depending on color designation: brown BN, red brown RB, or full red RD, with fully red, sharply struck mint state coins commanding higher interest. Strike quality from the Denver Mint in 1961 is usually solid, though collectors sometimes note minor weakness in the memorial steps or Lincoln's hair details. And while no major double die varieties are widely recognized for this issue, minor die chips, repunched mint marks, and planchet flaws can exist and add interest for variety specialists. Culturally, the 1961 D penny represents the humble workhorse of American coinage, a coin millions carried in pockets and purses, often overlooked yet deeply embedded in daily life. And today it stands as a tangible reminder of America's copper cent era, before rising metal prices and inflation would eventually change the composition and role of the 1-cent coin. Although not rare or highly valuable, its true significance lies in its historical continuity, classic copper composition, and enduring association with Abraham Lincoln, making the 1961 D 1-cent coin an essential and meaningful piece within any comprehensive collection. Next, top 2. The United States 1-cent coin dated 1962 with the D mint mark, widely known as the 1962 Lincoln Memorial Penny, is a classic example of America's copper-based small change from the early 1960s, a period marked by economic growth, social transformation, and the steady modernization of U.S. coinage. This coin was struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small d, located to the right of the date on the obverse, and it belongs to the famous Lincoln cent series, first issued in 1909 to honor the centennial of the birth of President Abraham Lincoln, a decision that forever altered U.S. coin design by introducing a real historical figure to everyday circulation. By 1962, the series had already transitioned to the Lincoln Memorial reverse, introduced in 1959 and designed by Frank Gasparo, replacing the earlier wheat ears reverse and symbolizing both reverence for Lincoln's legacy and the architectural grandeur of the nation's capital, with the memorial's columns carefully engraved and the seated statue of Lincoln visible in the center, making this one of the most intricate reverse designs ever used on a circulating U.S. coin. The obverse, designed by Victor David Brenner, features Lincoln's dignified right-facing portrait accompanied by the inscriptions "In God We Trust" at the top, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1962 with a D mint mark to the right. And in well-preserved examples, the details of Lincoln's hair, cheek, and coat show strong definition. Typical of early 1960s strikes, compositionally, the 1962 D penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, weighs 3.11 grams, has a diameter of 19.05 millimeters, and a plain edge, placing it firmly within the traditional bronze cent era that lasted until the early 1980s, and because of its high copper content, the coin naturally tones over time, transitioning from bright red to red-brown and eventually brown depending on storage and circulation. In terms of production, the Denver Mint struck approximately 1,774,896,000 coins, an exceptionally high mintage that reflects the heavy demand for cents during a time when cash transactions dominated daily life, meaning the coin is very common in circulated condition and widely available to collectors today. Historically, 1962 sits squarely within the Cold War era, under the presidency of John F. Kennedy, just months after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and as the United States pushed forward with the space race, civil rights reforms, and global political influence. This humble penny circulated alongside these monumental events, serving as an everyday object connecting ordinary citizens to a rapidly changing world. From a numismatic perspective, the 1962 D Lincoln cent is considered a standard issue rather than a rarity, making it ideal for beginner collectors, educational sets, and complete data and mint collections, with circulated examples usually worth face value, while uncirculated pieces command modest premiums depending on their color. Designation brown BN, red brown RB, or full red RD, with sharply struck, fully red mint state coins being the most desirable. Strike quality from the Denver Mint in 1962 is generally good, though minor softness in the Lincoln Memorial steps or lettering may be seen, and while no major double die varieties are famous for this issue, collectors sometimes encounter minor errors such as die cracks, off-center strikes, or repunched mint marks, which can add interest and value to specialists. Culturally and historically, the 1962 D penny represents the final decades of the traditional American copper cent, a coin that passed through countless hands in grocery stores, payphones, school cafeterias, and vending machines, embedding itself into everyday life in a way modern coinage rarely does. And while it may not be rare or expensive, its significance lies in its historical continuity, classic design, and material composition, making the 1962 D 1 cent coin a meaningful and essential component of any comprehensive collection of United States coinage. Next, top 3. The United States 1 cent coin dated 1964 with no mint mark, commonly known as the 1964 Lincoln Memorial Penny, is one of the most historically significant yet widely circulated coins of America, embodying a period of profound national transition, economic pressure, and change in U.S. coinage policy. The absence of a mint mark indicates that this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which at the time traditionally did not place mint marks on cents, and it belongs to the enduring Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln, marking the first time a real historical figure appeared on a regular U.S. circulating coin. The obverse design, created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, features a dignified right-facing portrait of Lincoln accompanied by the inscriptions "In God We Trust" along the top rim, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1964 to the right. And by this period the portrait had become one of the most instantly recognizable images in American daily life. The reverse design shows the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo and introduced in 1959 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, with remarkable detail for such a small coin, including the visible seated statue of Lincoln between the central columns, symbolically placing Lincoln on both sides of the coin at once. Compositionally, the 1964 penny is struck in the classic 95% copper and 5% zinc, bronze alloy, weighs 3.11 grams, measures 19.05 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain edge, representing the traditional copper cent formula that had been used for most of the 20th century before rising metal prices forced later changes. The year 1964 is especially important in U.S. numismatic history because it coincided with a major national coin shortage, driven by rising silver prices, hoarding, and public uncertainty following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November 1963, and although the cent contained no silver, it was still heavily hoarded, prompting the U.S. Mint to dramatically increase production to reassure the public that coins would remain plentiful. As a result, the Philadelphia Mint struck approximately 2,648,575,000, over 2.6 billion 1964 cents. An extraordinarily high mintage that makes this coin one of the most common Lincoln Memorial pennies ever produced, yet also one of the most historically telling. During this time, Americans were adjusting to sweeping social changes, including the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the ongoing Cold War, and the expansion of consumer culture, and the 1964 penny circulated endlessly through grocery stores, gas stations, schools, payphones, and vending machines, becoming a silent witness to these transformative events. From a collector's perspective, the 1964 no mint mark penny is extremely accessible and is often one of the first coins encountered by beginners. with circulated examples typically worth face value, while uncirculated pieces carry modest premiums depending on condition and color designation, brown, BN, red-brown, RB, or full red RD, with fully red, sharply struck mint state examples being the most desirable. Strike quality from the Philadelphia Mint in 1964 is generally average to good, though weak details in the Lincoln Memorial steps or minor softness in Lincoln's hair are not uncommon due to the massive production volume. And while no major double-die varieties are famous for this issue, collectors do encounter minor errors such as die cracks, grease-filled dies, off-center strikes, and planchet flaws, which can add interest and value for specialists. Culturally, the 1964 penny represents the last era of unquestioned dominance for the traditional copper cent, before inflation, metal price increases, and changing spending habits gradually diminished the cent's purchasing power. And today it stands as a tangible reminder of a time when a single penny still mattered in everyday transactions. Although not rare or expensive, the 1964 Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coin holds deep historical importance, symbolizing mass production, national reassurance during economic uncertainty, and the enduring legacy of Abraham Lincoln, making it an essential and meaningful piece in any comprehensive collection of United States coinage. Next, top 4. The United States 1-cent coin dated 1965 with no mint mark, commonly called the 1965 Lincoln Memorial penny, is a historically important and symbolically rich coin that reflects one of the most turbulent and transformative periods in modern American monetary history. The absence of a mint mark indicates that the coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not use mint marks on cents during this era, and it belongs to the long-running Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln, making it the first regularly circulating U.S. coin to feature a real historical person rather than an allegorical figure. The obverse design, created by Victor David Brenner, presents Lincoln's solemn right-facing portrait with the inscriptions "In God We Trust" along the upper rim, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1965 to the right. A design that by the mid-1960s had become deeply embedded in American cultural identity and everyday life. The reverse design, introduced in 1959 and created by Frank Gasparo, depicts the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., with carefully engraved columns and the seated statue of Lincoln visible in the center, a subtle artistic achievement that places Lincoln on both sides of the coin simultaneously, symbolizing permanence, unity, and remembrance. Compositionally, the 1965 penny is made of the traditional 95% copper and 5% zinc bronze alloy, weighs 3.11 grams, measures 19.05 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain edge, representing the classic copper cent formula that would remain in use until rising metal prices forced changes in the late 1970s and early 1980s. The year 1965 is one of the most critical years in U.S. coinage history, as it marks the full implementation of the Coinage Act of 1965, which removed silver from dimes and quarters and reduced silver content in half dollars, a response to severe nationwide coin shortages caused by hoarding, inflation fears, and rising bullion prices. And although the cent contained no silver, it was heavily hoarded along with other coins, prompting the U.S. Mint to dramatically increase production and temporarily suspend the use of mint marks from 1965 through 1967 to discourage collectors from setting coins aside. As a result, the Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 1,833,000,000, about 1.8 billion, 1965 cents, an enormous mintage that ensured the penny remained plentiful in circulation, making it extremely common today. Historically, this coin circulated during a time of profound national change, including the height of the Vietnam War, the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the continuation of the Civil Rights Movement, the Cold War rivalry with the Soviet Union, and rapid social and cultural shifts across American society, and millions of Americans used this penny daily for basic transactions such as newspapers, candy, public transportation, and payphones. From a numismatic standpoint, the 1965 no-mint mark penny is not rare and is widely available, making it a staple in Lincoln cent collections and an ideal coin for beginners, with circulated examples typically worth face value, while uncirculated pieces carry modest premiums depending on condition and color designation, brown, BN, red-brown, RB, or full red RD with bright red, sharply struck mint state examples being the most desirable to collectors. Strike quality in 1965 can vary, as the mint prioritized quantity over perfection during the coin shortage, resulting in occasional weak strikes, especially on the Lincoln Memorial steps or Lincoln's finer hair details. And while no major double-die varieties are widely known for this issue, collectors do encounter minor errors such as die cracks, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and grease-filled dies, which add interest and modest value, culturally and historically. The 1965 Lincoln penny stands as a powerful symbol of America's transition away from precious metal coinage toward modern fiat-based money, representing stability during uncertainty and continuity amid change. And although it is neither rare nor expensive, the 1965 1-cent coin holds lasting significance as a tangible artifact of mid-1960s America, the final great era of the traditional copper penny, and the enduring legacy of Abraham Lincoln in everyday American life. Next, top 5. The United States 1-cent coin dated 1968 with the D mint mark, commonly referred to as the 1968 Lincoln Memorial Penny, represents a key moment in the evolution of modern American coinage, blending the long-standing traditions of the copper cent with important changes in minting practices during a decade marked by social upheaval, political tension, and economic transition. The D mint mark identifies the coin as having been struck at the Denver Mint, and 1968 is especially notable because it marks the return of mint marks to U.S. coinage after their temporary suspension from 1965 through 1967, a policy enacted by the U.S. Mint to discourage hoarding during the nationwide coin shortages of the mid-1960s, making the 1968 D cent historically significant as one of the first Denver-marked pennies Americans saw again after several years. The coin belongs to the iconic Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the birth of President Abraham Lincoln, and the obverse design by Victor David Brenner shows a dignified right-facing portrait of Lincoln with the inscriptions "In God We Trust" across the top, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1968 with a D mint mark to the right, a layout that had become deeply familiar to generations of Americans by the late 1960s. The reverse features the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo and first used in 1959, depicting the neoclassical monument in Washington, D.C., with the seated statue of Lincoln visible between the central columns, a subtle artistic detail that effectively places Lincoln on both sides of the coin and symbolizes national unity and remembrance. Compositionally, the 1968 D penny is struck in the traditional 95% copper and 5% zinc bronze alloy, weighs 3.11 grams, measures 19.05 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain edge, representing the classic copper cent formula that would remain standard until the early 1980s, before rising copper prices led to a change in composition. In terms of production, the Denver Mint struck approximately 1,657,377,300, about 1.65 billion 1968 D cents, an enormous mintage reflecting the Mint's continued emphasis on producing large quantities of circulating coinage to meet the demands of a growing population and cash-based economy, making this coin extremely common in circulated condition today. Historically, the year 1968 was one of the most dramatic in American history, marked by the Vietnam War, widespread protests, the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and major cultural shifts, and the 1968 D penny circulated quietly through daily commerce during these turbulent times, passing through the hands of millions as Americans navigated uncertainty and change. From a numismatic perspective, the 1968 D Lincoln cent is considered a common-date issue, widely available and affordable, making it a standard inclusion in Lincoln cent albums and an excellent coin for beginning collectors, with circulated examples generally worth face value, while uncirculated pieces can command modest premiums depending on their condition and color designation: brown, BN, red-brown, RB, or full red, RD, with bright red sharply struck mint state examples being the most desirable. Strike quality for the 1968 D issue is generally good, though some coins show minor weakness in the Lincoln Memorial steps or fine obverse details due to high-speed production, and while no major doubled die varieties are widely recognized for this date, collectors sometimes encounter minor mint errors such as die cracks, off-center strikes, repunched mint marks, and planchet flaws, which can add interest and collectible appeal. Culturally and historically, the 1968 D 1-cent coin stands as a symbol of continuity during a period of national unrest, representing the resilience of everyday American life and the enduring presence of Lincoln's image in the nation's pockets. And although it is not rare or highly valuable, its importance lies in its historical context, classic copper composition, and role in the return of mint marks, making it a meaningful and essential piece within any comprehensive collection of United States coinage.